So today I want to talk about some of the repercussions that can happen when we operate out of the eight worldly concerns, especially driven by fear, attachment to reputation, greed, and especially ignorance. Many of you know that I used to work for the Forest Service for many years, and during that time, one of my kind of side jobs was to be a wildland firefighter, mostly just on the weekends or for 2-week assignments when it was really busy fire season. And I learned a lot from doing that job, which was fun but also very difficult. Some of the points that I learned was one of the sayings they said was to keep your head on a swivel, which meant to always be looking around, to not just put your nose in the dirt and dig, but to actually pay attention to what's going on, called situational awareness, where just knowing that conditions can change so quickly. And you might have a plan of, okay, we're going to dig a line up this slope on this way, and we have our strategy. And you're working with nature and many changing conditions that can, change the plan instantly and be life-threatening if you're not paying attention. So how important it is to constantly be aware of tracking what time of day it is. Oh, it's in the afternoon. Oh, things are getting hotter. That's usually when fire activity gets a little more active, or the fuels are getting warmer. Just constantly paying attention and being aware of your surroundings, not just what's right in front of you. Another thing they taught us was to always time your escape for the slowest person, that you're working together as a group, and you don't want to be like, okay, I'm strong and fast, I can run out of here in 10 minutes, but to remember, oh yeah, there's that person who's maybe a little out of shape or not as fast. We all have to get out together. It's not just about me, but we're working together as a group. And also that I need to take care of myself as well, and not just keep working, but to remember to take breaks and pay attention to if I'm feeling tired, and to let people know that, so that I can say, okay, I'm feeling tired. If we need to get out of here quick, I'm going to be slower. Another point was that communication is absolutely vital. Of all of the fatalities, which we would study each year as kind of a training to see the situations that happened the previous year of when people died, communication breakdown was one of the leading causes of fatalities, of either radios running out of their batteries, just people not informing other groups of what was happening on the fire, not people informing that there was a tree blocking the escape route. Again and again, it was just emphasized how vital communication is. And I mean, we can see that living in community here, that it's like we just have to constantly keep sharing information and not making assumptions that other people know what I'm thinking or what's happening. In my time of fighting fire, I enjoyed it, and it was very fulfilling, courageous work. But I could also see through my training from education that sometimes we didn't need to be fighting the fires. There were times where I was fighting fire in the freezing rain in October. One time I was in camp and we woke up and there was snow on the ground, and I was just like, why are we out here? And so the Forest Service has gotten into a pattern of, they know that fire is a natural part of the system, but they've gotten off track on thinking that they have to do 100% suppression. And I mean, they've identified that they don't want to do 100% suppression, but rarely do they actually have the courage to hold back and not go in. We have such a strong reaction to see a problem and attack it and try to fix it and try to suppress it and control it. And so it takes so much more creativity and considering many, many different factors to have that courage to say, no, actually this fire is way far away from any towns or houses. Fire is so important in our natural systems to keep things healthy that it takes courage in the leaders to make that decision and to stand up to it, and to maybe make a mistake if there's so many different factors driving fires, that if the wind does change, then that's just what happens. But we get into this way of thinking that identifying the enemy fire as bad and that we have to attack it and suppress it all the time with such a intensity and urgency. And rarely do we actually, or rarely do I pause to think, like when Okunga said, is this really a problem? Is this really a threat? The reason we're having more of these problems is that there's more humans in the forests. Historically, there has been even more fires in the landscape. Fires are not increasing. We used to actually have way more fires in our systems, and that would be much more natural. But the challenge is now that we have many more humans living in the forests, and that's where the challenge is. And so it's not to take the approach of suppressing all fires everywhere, but actually just protecting the homes. Let the fires burn around the homes, but we can do so much to actually protect the homes. And as we're learning again and again, we're kind of dense as humans, that nature is a lot better at doing what nature needs to do than humans are. There's an author and researcher and longtime ecologist called Chad Hansen who's written a book called Smokescreen that's really debunking so many of these myths that we hold about fires, land management, logging practices, and really challenging a lot of these just longstanding assumptions that we have about fire, including that we think that there's low frequency and high intensity fires are actually more supportive of species diversity. Often we hear in the news that high intensity fires just scorch everything and kill all of life, but that's not really true. From his research, he's been finding that these high intensity fires bring up a lot more diversity. They don't happen very often, but they're actually very healthy for the forests. He's also found that dense forests and large woody debris actually is the best protection against forests, which completely changes the way I've been taught in my school and the way the Forest Service thinks, that you think there's a lot of trees, a lot of density, that means there's a lot of fuel, but those trees contain more moisture and cool temperatures down. So another point is that snags and downwoody debris are among the most ecologically valuable habitat features in the forest, and that they don't spread the fire, they don't increase fires, which again we've been taught largely through the logging industry, where people are fixated on seeing trees as money, and that dead trees are worthless, that it completely challenges that concept. But through his study and research, is finding that snags provide so much habitat and nutrients, much more than is the commonly held assumption. And he's also finding that, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but again, it's challenges a huge assumption that the weather and the climate, our increasing climate change, is the most important variables in fire behavior, not forest density, which is kind of, again, the mantra that we've heard from the logging industry, that we need to reduce our forest density, but they don't want to admit that climate change is the driving factor. Yeah, again, we've had much more intense large-scale fires in the past. You've probably heard of the 1910 fire, that in 3 days, 3 million acres burned in this region from Idaho all the way to Washington. So historically, there's been huge, huge fires, but that's what brings the diversity and the different habitat patterns. It doesn't scorch the entire forest. Fire burns in a mosaic pattern, and that's what creates the diversity of some burned areas, some unburned areas, and having all those different habitat features creates so much more diversity. So even though we have climate change, we still don't have as many fires. But human beings are doing what human beings do. We think we're smarter than nature, and we try to control and manipulate nature, and we have our thought of how it should be, but we're not actually pausing to study it and challenge our assumptions. We're not learning from our actions. We've created a system that's actually hurting the forests and communities as well, and reducing species diversity. I had a coworker that said, when I was talking about these issues, he said, follow the money. And sadly, that line comes true again and again. Sadly, with the Forest Service, the people that are making the decisions to fight the fires are also the ones that are earning the money to fight the fire. So there's not really a incentive to not fight fires. And the logging industries are very supportive of fighting fires because then they go in and do salvage logging where they harvest all the burned trees. So it's a sad situation where we're trying to protect our forests, but we're not really doing it in the wisest way possible because greed, ignorance, and arrogance and attachment to reputation gets in the way. But there's no easy quick fix. I mean, we can have a challenge, but I find in myself that I always want that quick solution, quick fix. And that's not how it works. I mean, it's so dynamic and diverse that it takes a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion, and a lot of looking from different angles to come up with the greatest solution, which is not how things are going. It's especially in the scope of fire where you have to make quick decisions. You can't just sit around and be like, do we do this or not? But you have to have that plan in place before the fire happens and decide, okay, we're gonna let all these areas burn under these conditions, considering wind, temperature, time of year, many different factors. It just takes a lot of looking at the bigger picture rather than just going yes or no, suppress the fire. So it takes a lot more work. But again and again, we can turn our mind and know that we need to let nature take care of itself. Nature does a much better job than humans do. What we need to do is learn to work on our own mind. We need to learn how to control our greed, self-centeredness, and arrogance, and to actually learn and observe from nature, and to work on subduing that automatic reaction to just fix things, to think that I know how things work, and to have that impulse to fix the problem. Because the reality is that everything is always constantly changing, that there's many, many causes and conditions, and that everything's connected. And so the more time we spend in nature, the more time we can appreciate that diversity and complexity, and then also learn from nature and be able to incorporate that into our own minds and to realize our connection and to work on bringing more peace and understanding so that we can work to bring more harmony for ourselves and for all beings, including the planet.